Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to dig into a really interesting piece of commentary from Sky News Australia. We'll look at how they take three totally different news stories and weave them all together to make one big point about the media and political elites.
Now, just so we're clear, our goal here isn't to fact-check anything or to take sides. Nope. What we're doing is pulling apart the arguments themselves right from the source. We want to understand how they're building their narrative.
So, here's the game plan. We'll start with their take on foreign policy reporting, then jump to a debate about class and politics, and finally, a pretty personal critique. After all that, we'll see how they wrap it all up into one single, overarching argument. All right, let's dive into the first part, the Iran talks. This is where the source really starts to build its case, zeroing in on how the media covered potential peace talks between the US and Iran.
And yeah, they come out swinging. The Sky News host doesn't hold back at all, basically framing some journalists as activists, even accusing them of just uncritically repeating talking points from a hostile government.
So, according to the source, this whole situation put the media in a tough spot, stuck between two completely opposite stories. And that, of course, creates a big question for anyone watching. Who are you supposed to believe?
Okay, so on one hand, you've got the White House saying, yep, talks are happening. But on the other hand, Iranian state-aligned media is saying, no way, that's not happening. The whole critique from the source here is that the media presented both of these claims as equally valid, which just left everyone confused. But then, the story takes a turn. As the source points out, CNN later reported that a senior Iranian official actually did confirm that Washington reached out. This, of course, seemed to back up what the White House was saying all along.
So, if the White House was right, why was the media so skeptical in the first place? Well, the guest on the show has a theory. He calls it Trump Derangement Syndrome, and basically suggests that a built-in bias against the former president made the media unwilling to believe his administration no matter what.
And to support that idea, the guest brings up what he calls a track record of foreign policy wins. He mentions things like brokering the release of American hostages, getting India and Pakistan to the negotiating table, and doing the same for Azerbaijan and Armenia. The argument is, with these successes, the president should have earned the benefit of the doubt from the press.
All right, now the source makes a big pivot. We're moving away from foreign policy and into a domestic issue. This one's all about the commentary around Markwayne Mullin's confirmation, and the debate really centers on his working-class background. So here's the thing the source focuses on. Before he got into politics, Mullin was a plumber. And that one fact becomes the absolute centerpiece of the criticism that the Sky News segment is tearing apart. And this right here is a perfect example of the kind of mockery they're talking about. This joke is presented by the source as a pretty condescending jab at his profession. But this is where the source pushes back, and it's pretty interesting. They defend Mullin by saying, hey, wait a minute. Sure, he was a plumber, but he was also a super successful businessman who sold his company for millions. Oh, and he also served as both a congressman and a senator before this appointment. This leads the guest on the show to define what they mean by elitist when they're talking about the people mocking Mullin. And their definition isn't about how much money you have or where you went to school. No, for them, it's about being out of touch with the actual desires of the American people. So the key idea here is being disconnected. Okay, for our third and final piece of the puzzle, things get a lot more personal. The source shifts its focus to commentary from former White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki about former First Lady Melania Trump.
So, check this out. This is the comparison that sparks the whole critique. Jen Psaki is quoted basically putting Melania Trump side by side with a humanoid robot and then saying the robot comes across as more empathetic and warmer. I mean, wow.
And the reaction from the Sky News host is, well, it's immediate and it's sharp. She calls Psaki an awful, bitter person for saying that. So the whole thing is framed not as some kind of political analysis, but as a flat-out personal attack. And then the guest chimes in with a potential motive, suggesting that these comments aren't just bitter, but that they reek of jealousy. This adds a whole psychological layer to the source's argument, trying to explain why someone would say that. All right, so we've looked at Iran, a plumber turned politician, and the First Lady. Three really different topics, right? So how in the world does the source connect all these dots? Let's break down their grand finale. Well, the source argues these aren't just random one-off events. Instead, they're presented as pieces of a larger pattern. You've got media bias in foreign policy. Then you have elitism, looking down on someone's working-class background. And finally, you have this personal, bitter animosity aimed at political figures. And that all leads to this, the main takeaway.
The commentary's final conclusion is that these three examples are all just symptoms of the very same problem, a consistent, deeply rooted bias coming from what they call the elite left wing.
So, by breaking all this down, we can really see how specific news events get framed to build a much broader argument. And it leaves us with a really important question to think about. When we watch partisan commentary like this, from any side really, how does it shape not just what we think, but how we think about the news itself?